and intellectual sciences were Persians. Thus, the truth of the statement of the prophet becomes apparent. If learning was suspended at the highest parts of heaven, the Persians would attain it.
The Iranians played a major role in the development of Islamic civilization, yet they preserved much of their cultural heritage, including the Persian language. As a result, by the second half of the 9th century, a number of local dynasties that emerged in the eastern part of Iran, mainly in the Khorasan region, became the proponents of Persian poetry and literature. This trend continued even when the Seljuks, a large nomadic clan of Turkic origin, pushed through Iran in the 11th century. They were eventually transformed into the rulers of a centralized state under the influence of Iranian administrative institutions already in place.
All the politics, financial and administrative institutions had been created by the able officers, clergy and bureaucracy of Iranians. The top model of this was Nizam al-Mulk. His siyasatname became almost a constitution for centuries for Turks and other Islamic peoples.
2 centuries before the first European university was founded at Bologna, Nizam al-Mulk for the first time established universities with a unique campus system at Nishapur, Isfahan, and other major cities.
They gave rewards to people, to the students who did very well and achieved a certain degree, such that they gave them robes of honor and even talismans, caps. And I think that it's fairly generally agreed that this is the origin of the cap and gown which you wear in Western universities when you get degrees, when you finish your course of study, that it goes back for, well, almost 1,000 years to the East.
Persian poetry is unique in the world for its depth, richness, and creativity, and there is an intimate mingling of Persian mysticism and Persian literature.
The love for poetry is extraordinary, and there is no other country in the world that I know of which would have the same love for literature.
The greatest monument of Persian epic poetry is Ferdowsi's masterpiece, the Shahnameh, or Book of Kings, comparable to Homer's Iliad. 1,000 years after its creation, the Shahnameh is still easily understood by the Persian-speaking general public.
When I was young, and I was a classics major at the time, I loved Homer, I went to a museum and I saw the illuminations from the Shahnameh and decided any text that generated such gorgeous illuminations had to be read in the middle, which is why I've given my life to reading the Shahnameh.
Sophistication and sublimity finds no limit in the Iranian miniature paintings, which usually adorn the dazzling manuscripts of Iranian poetry.
When one reads a page or two of Nizami's, he immediately feels an inclination for painting. Since Nizami had an extraordinary talent for storytelling and imagination, in his works, color, movement, and story are all visualized.
In fact, in all 4 essential features of the art of the book, calligraphy, bookbinding, illumination, and illustration, the Iranian artists reached the peak of perfection.
in the art of the books, there's a very precise construction in the beginning, you see. And in the ornamentation, you have a very solid preparation of a geometrical design.
Selection of the style of calligraphy and the type of pen itself for each text was an art in itself. Another interesting art was Iranian bookbinding that was copied even in Europe.
Certain Renaissance Italian bookbinding done in Venice was in fact copied from the method prevalent in Iran. And it's even possible to say that the bookbinder himself was from the city of Tabriz in Iran. This is one of the most exquisite methods in the West up to the present day.
Persian mystical poetry reached its pinnacle in the works of Jalal-ad-Din Rumi. Rumi's considerable intellectual and poetic skills infused his poetry with delight, ecstasy, and spiritual zest. His greatest work is known as the Masnavi.
He was a person who was a great scholar. It was almost all the streams of Islamic thought before him flow into the Masnavi, but transformed mystically. Maulana Jalaluddin was also given by God the incredible gift of appreciating every form of beauty as the beauty of God. The famous hadith of the Prophet, ﷺ, Allahu Jamilun yuhibbu Jamal, that is, God is beautiful and He loves beauty, marks the whole being of Jalaluddin.
When we think of the most popular moralist in Persian literature, Sa'di comes to mind. He writes, "The sons of Adam are the limbs of one body, created of one essence. When time pained one limb, the others can find no peace. Thou, who hast no sympathy for the troubles of others, art unworthy of the name human." From India to the Balkans, the poetry of Hafez, the story of love, beauty, and unselfishness, enjoyed great popularity.
Hafez is the prince of Persian lyric poetry. He believed that man's selfishness is responsible for all his sufferings. Thus, egoism is the bondage from which one has to be liberated. What Hafez saw in his days was selfishness, misery, war, and bloodshed. Yet, like alchemy, he transformed these inputs into golden melodies and spiritual taverns of celestial wine. Be a passionate pilgrim of the pass of love, and behold what blessings shall come thy way in this journey.
The calm and prosperity which provided the fertile ground for the development of such works of art was abruptly shaken by the brutal forces of Genghis Khan, known as the Mongols, followed by Tamerlane.
In the 13th and 14th century, just like the strong winds from the east, 2 invasions almost destroyed the nation. But like a cypress tree, which bends to the ground in the wind and then returns, so did Iran and its culture.
When you look at history of Iran, and suddenly you realize that constantly there were invaders coming. From the west, it was Alexander the Great and the Arabs. From the east, it were the Turks and the Mongols. You realize that Iran shouldn't have existed on the map of history for centuries, for millennia. It should have been wiped out completely because it is on the crossroad of all the civilizations and the battlefield for many armies. But Iran is still alive and kicking and well. How is it possible? All those invaders who came on the Iranian plateau, they were so attracted to Iranian way of life, to Iranian civilization, to beauty of music, the beauty of poetry, the beauty of miniature, the beauty of Persian cuisine, that within a very short period, they tried and wanted to become Iranian, Persian.
As these coins testify, the Mongols gradually turned to Islam, which became the official religion of their ruling dynasty, known as the Ilkhanids. They, like the Seljuks, found out that they cannot rule without the help of Iranian ministers or viziers. The northwestern Iranian city of Tabriz was chosen as their capital. Marco Polo, who had visited Tabriz at that time, thus describes it.
A great city surrounded by beautiful and pleasant gardens. It is excellently situated so that goods are brought to here from many regions. Latin merchants, especially Genoese, go there to buy the goods that come from foreign lands.
Here, the famous Iranian vizier Rashiduddin Hamadani created an entire suburb called Rabi Rashidi, employing within it scholars, doctors, and craftsmen. Rashiduddin's Foundation Act for this city of science reveals that it was well planned and included 24 caravanserai or inns, 1,500 shops, 30,000 houses, and textile and paper manufacturing workshops. A special zone was allotted to housing scientists and physicians invited from across the world to work at Rabi Rashidi's International Hospital.
Beginning in the 13th century, colorful tile decoration becomes very prominent in the decoration of palaces in Iran. It becomes kind of a decorative sheath for the interior of buildings.
This could be seen at Sultaniye, the landmark of the new Ilkhanid king, Sultan Muhammad's capital city. Now in ruins, it might have looked like this when it was intact. Perhaps the boldest innovation of this building is the corona of 8 minarets. André Godard thus described it.
The blue dome, vivid and gleaming with its brilliant crown of minarets, seems to float in the sky. Here is a dome with a span of 80 feet, built solely of bricks, which stands simply by virtue of a perfectly conceived and constructed profile.
According to studies by an Italian team headed by Professor Piero San Paolesi from the University of Florence, the plan and structure of the Great Dome at Sultanieh has had a direct impact on the design and construction of the Church of Santa Maria del Fiore in the city of Florence. After the second wave of invasion by Tamerlane and the power struggle which followed by his successors, the country was divided between different sultans and petty kings. It was now the right time for the emergence of a unified Iran. At the beginning of the 16th century, the semi-nomadic Turkmen Shia tribes of Anatolia and northwestern Iran, with their charismatic leader Ismail the Safavid, gradually gained control over Iran. Subsequently, the extraordinary revival of Iranian civilization took shape, and an invigorating culture flourished. The most distinguished of the Safavid rulers was Shah Abbas, who came to the throne in 1587. During his rule, an Englishman, Sir Robert Shirley, trained the Safavid army in the use of artillery. With this new force, Shah Abbas drove back the Uzbeks in the northeast and the Ottomans in the northwest. The Safavid rule was manifested by two important developments. First, the re-emergence of a nation-state as the core of an empire. Second, the consolidation of Shi'i Islam as the national religion of the country.